Hello, and welcome to Insight Future's new podcast, Time for Action. Today, we kick off our 12-week countdown to COP26, the 26th annual UN Climate Change Conference of Parties, which will be hosted in Glasgow from the 31st of October to the 12th of November. The focus for this week's episode is the need for change. Our CEO, Doug Morwood, speaks with Douglas Morrison, Director of Operations and Future Skills at Construction Scotland Innovation Centre, where they discuss incremental change versus radical change and the key drivers required to achieve it. So, without further ado, let's dive straight in. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy our very first episode of Time for Action.
I'm here with Douglas Morrison of Construction Scotland Innovation Centre. Douglas, what's your role within the Construction Scotland Innovation Centre?
So I'm the Director of Operations and Future Skills at Innovation Centre, and I look after our operations team, our future skills team, and our technical team.
That seems quite a lot. You must be kept busy.
Keep me busy, yeah.
So I'm interested in hearing your views on how we might accelerate the transition to a circular economy built environment here in Scotland. Well, first of all, how aware are you of the circular economy in terms of designing out waste, optimizing materials and regenerating natural systems?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm fairly comfortable with certainly the concept of the circular economy. You know, there are some good examples in our industry. Of course, we'd like to see more, and we'd like to see circular practices being adopted into the mainstream.
Of course. Do you agree that a move to a circular economy from a linear economy makes sense?
Absolutely. I think it's a critical precursor to our net zero ambitions.
Okay, so do you see a time when we'll ever move completely from a linear to a circular economy?
I don't know that there'll ever be a time where we move 100%. I think the challenge is ensuring that we're constantly moving in the right direction. I think we have some fairly ambitious targets leading up to 2045. The circular economy will inevitably play a huge role in meeting those targets. So I'd certainly like to see year-on-year progress towards circular as standard.
So you mentioned 2045 in Scotland to hit net zero carbon targets, and even 2030 at a number of our cities and towns and local authority areas in Scotland. What do you think are the key drivers to at least moving towards that circular economy in the built environment in Scotland?
I mean, I think like many things, we've got the moral case, which I think is persuasive for many of us, and certainly for those who have more progressive thoughts around what the built environment can deliver for our society, for our environment, for our economy. But we also have those business drivers and, of course, the legislative drivers. And I think what we need is a fine balance between the three. Ultimately, I can see an industry which responds very well to legislation. It responds very well to investment. And what I'd like to see is very clear, visible leadership from government through local authorities, through major clients, and to really drive behavioural change within our industry. And a big part of that, of course, is raising awareness. A big part is ensuring availability of those circular supply chains. But also there is absolutely a cultural mindset shift is required right through our society to really understand the value that circular practices can bring.
So there need to be multiple stakeholders that turn up, leadership showing that public, private, government, local authority, private sector, investment, community, citizens. I mean, it's quite a big ask, but there certainly seems to be a move in that direction in terms of awareness. It seems to be that net zero, climate emergency, even circular economy issues are becoming more mainstream. You see them on the news pretty much most nights nowadays and in the newspapers. Do you think it will require a transitional, more incremental change or more transformational or radical change to accelerate this transition in time for 2030 targets to be met?
I mean, I don't want to sit on the fence at all, Doug, but I'd suggest the answer is both. I think that what we'll see in terms of behaviours and attitudes will invariably be incremental. I think what we need to see at a policy and investment level is more transformational. We're discussing an industry, a built environment industry, which is notoriously difficult to define. It is fragmented. It's made up predominantly of small and micro businesses, and it can be tough to drive transformative change through that fragmented landscape. But what we absolutely can do is make those transformational leaps in our policy, in our investment, and in our collective ambition. Invariably, as I've already mentioned, our industry responds well to that, and I would fully expect that a combination of consumer demand and material product component availability will ultimately drive that incremental change through those small micro businesses.
Yeah, so you mentioned that there are a number of fragmented or distributed areas or factors of how this can move forward, or the built environment or the construction industry as defined. And it seems to be that it has to be demand-led. The construction industry responds very positively when there's a level playing field. And I suppose moving from short-term cost to whole life value, that can come through maybe in public sector tendering and government legislation. Do you think there's more that government can do, especially when it's procuring maybe over 52% or over 50% of the construction industry in Scotland and the UK? Could it do more to help create that level playing field through policy, legislation, public sector procurement?
No, absolutely. And I've certainly been heartened by the government's visible leadership, through the leadership through the key public sector agencies in this space as well. Whilst I appreciate that, as you've mentioned, this is an incredibly complex, ecosystem that we operate within, and there are no shortage of policy and legislative changes that can be made. What I would point towards is some of the ambitious legislative changes that have been made around our transition to hybrid, electric, and I suppose non-fossil fuel vehicles. What would be helpful is for the government to make similar, visible targets around our adoption and procurement of circular materials and products. I think if we can set a clear date for industry to work towards, and to articulate a clear pipeline of public sector investment in circular solutions, and then again, that will give our industry confidence to accelerate that transition.
Yeah, I think the demand side is going to catalyse and incentivise the supply chain or the supply side, and create. We need that level playing field of confirmed pipeline, asking for it in a different way that provides that confidence, I suppose, for the supply chain to invest in developing their capacity and capability to provide alternative materials, circular innovation, possibly more digital integration, and that SME and micro business community needs to be supported, I suppose, and to be able to kind of rising tide, lifting many boats, I suppose. Do you think the supply chain gets sufficient access to clients and their design teams in order to collaborate around sometimes the locked-in value that's already there within the supply chain?
Yeah, I think it can be difficult. I think particularly for smaller businesses within the supply chain, they can be many steps removed from any form of decision-making process, and often even further removed from a design process. I think what we've seen recently is investment in our supply chain through supply chain development programme and through other schemes, and a recognition that for Scotland to really flourish in this space, we do need to support these small local businesses who are built upon locally sourced, sustainable natural materials, and who feed them into the supply chain. Ultimately, I think our construction industry will procure the materials, products, and components that are best fit for the job, and which are available at competitive prices. What we need to ensure is that the costs that we're building into procurement activity, as you have said, are reflective of whole life costs and of whole life value, rather than that cheapest comes first mentality that has been so pervasive.
So with regards to that local supply chain and I suppose access and a level playing field, and this, there's a very creative, innovative industry. When they're asked to turn up in particular ways, they problem solve on site mainly all the time. It would be great if we could do things with modern methods in construction, that we're standardization, maybe a higher adoption of BIM and things like that would avoid reworking or clashes on site. But how important is that local sourcing, local supply chain development, maybe even reinvigorating local manufacturing? As a way to create that local circular economy, especially in the light of the disruption we've had from Brexit, the pandemic, even the Suez incident has had this big impact on the local market just now, with materials being difficult to get and price fluctuations.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen over the last 12 to 18 months, the impact on material shortages, but also the impact on our economy, on our jobs, and particularly in rural and regional, rural and remote areas. We've seen a particularly prevalent impact. And I think if Scotland's serious about developing these locally sourced low carbon supply chains, we do need to look towards our natural and sustainable materials and assets, and ultimately ask that question: what does a resilient and capable supply chain look like in Scotland? And that's not something that can happen on its own. It does require investment. It requires training. It requires visibility of pipeline. It requires legislation. But ultimately, we need to approach this as a one team Scotland challenge. I have no doubt whatsoever that we have the capability, we have the ambition. What we need is the clarity. We need that systemic approach to developing a robust and resilient supply chain that can deliver on Scotland's infrastructure and general built environment needs.
Yeah, I suppose a bit of a chicken and egg situation as well, where if the client isn't asking for it, the supply chain may not develop its capacity and capability to deliver it, and therefore, if it's not there to be asked for, the client can't access it. Do you see more and more clients of the built environment and construction and infrastructure industries asking for circular innovation or different circular products and services?
We absolutely do. It's Scotland's National Innovation Centre for the Built Environment. We are here to support the mainstreaming of new products, processes, services, and models, and the kind of near to market, new to market technologies that we know exist are absolutely garnering interest, particularly from public sector and kind of larger investor clients. I think the big challenge that we've got just now is taking those solutions from what often are fairly niche into the mainstream to provide that scalability and to provide them with the support through government and through industry investment to scale up and to be able to service the industry at the point of need. So yes, we're seeing good examples coming through the supply chain. We're seeing an increase in interest from our clients and designers, and we are trying to work hand in hand with all stakeholders to make sure that we can mainstream the availability of circular solutions as quickly and as effectively as possible.
Thank you. What role then does Construction Scotland Innovation Centre take in terms of possibly reacting to what you're seeing coming through in the industry, or leading and incentivising and catalysing innovation, and particularly circular innovation?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's kind of two aspects to the answer there. I mean, the first thing that we're very keen to do is to identify those solutions that are at the early stages of their development, quite often pre-commercialisation, and supporting businesses to get their products and services into the market as quickly as possible. So a big part of what we will do is signpost towards clients, signpost towards investors and designers, and ensure that there is visibility of the art of the possible in many respects. The other side of what we do is to identify those problems and opportunities and those gaps in the market that we know exist, and work with our academic community from Scotland's colleges and universities, as well as our industry partners, to look at a whole range of viable solutions, which we can then support towards commercialisation. So I suppose in summary, our role, as I've mentioned before, is to really catalyse the interest and awareness of circular solutions, and to support stakeholders right across our industry and our wider ecosystem to maximise the value that they can bring to our built environment.
I've definitely appreciated the support and the collaborative opportunities with Construction Scotland Innovation Centre ourselves at Insight Futures here. But I also see that really important connection between government, local and national, academia, in terms of trying to apply the knowledge that can come out of there with industry, and particularly into SMEs and the startups that can also bring, positively disruptive new ideas to fruition, is a really key role that you play in kind of signposting and directing and supporting people to find each other, I suppose, so that collaboration happens, because no one single organisation or sector is going to be able to help move us forward. It's going to have to be a collaborative approach, which you seem to be sitting right in the heart of. Just a couple more questions, Douglas. What then do you think are the main barriers in accelerating the transition to a circular economy built environment here in Scotland?
I think it's those same barriers. It's investment, it's demand. It's that kind of legislative push, and of course it's the availability of the circular solutions that are on the market. So the best thing that we can do as an industry, as a society, is to legislate our ambition around circular materials and products and systems, to make sure that the pipeline demand is very clearly articulated, to enable our manufacturing base, our wider supply chain to respond to that, and to ensure that designers, specifiers, main contractors, clients, and others are incentivized to take a circular first approach. I often hear you, Doug, talking about systems thinking. I think that's exactly what we need here. And there isn't one place where this solution sits. It genuinely is a Team Scotland approach, and it's one that we will only achieve if we all collectively buy into this ambitious vision for a circular Scotland.
Yes. A kind of coalition of the willing, more evidence, more pioneering pathways, more breakthroughs that kind of encourage and give confidence to others to think, well, actually, this is the way to go forward. So positively, to end on a positive note then, what do you think are the main enabling factors? You've probably covered a number of them all throughout, but that would accelerate that transition. Do you see some of these enabling factors in place, or do you think that there's some more that you could mention?
Yeah, I do. As I say, we've seen a steady stream of legislation and policy coming through government, public sector agencies, and local authorities. We're seeing fairly ambitious retrofit and decarbonisation programs start up all over the country, and colleagues within the built environment are looking very carefully at how we can embed circular practices within the solutions that we look to roll out. I genuinely believe that there's never been a better time to invest in circular. We have the targets, we have the ambitions, we have the collective will, we have rising public interest, and we have the capability. We have a great deal of expertise, case studies, and understanding of how to make this work in Scotland. We have all the right ingredients, and what we need more than ever is that sustained focus, investment, and connectivity right across our ecosystem to make it happen.
Yeah, I suppose it goes without saying that COP26 is also unifying kind of a collective vision, not just here in Scotland but globally. So it's not just to COP, it's beyond COP as well. But Scotland's Absolutely. In a prime position to, I suppose, it's the biggest event that's ever happened in Glasgow and one of the biggest in Scotland. So this will be certainly focusing people's attention. Any final comments or any question I should have asked that you may want to contribute or think about?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have any further questions, but what I would say in closing is that we sit at a moment of potentially significant change, change which undoubtedly will resonate for generations to come, and we have a duty to approach this challenge, this opportunity, with positivity and through collaboration, and so I'd welcome anyone in the built environment or with an interest in built environment who's keen to adopt circular practices to get in touch, and certainly encourage anyone working in this space to think circular first.
Thank you very much, Douglas Morrison.
Thank you, Doug.
Well, folks, that was our CEO Doug Morwood and Douglas Morrison of Construction Scotland Innovation Centre discussing the need for change. Links to both parties' social media channels can be found in the bio. Tune in next Friday, where we'll be joined by another guest to look at a vision for the future. Thanks for listening, and have a great weekend.